Right. Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're taking another look at this, but it's actually not this. It's this, which is like this, but not this. This is my first edition of what I was calling the threaded insert heat press. The new one is called Heatsert Insert Press, but has a proper name, VLMP, which stands for Vertical Linear Motion Press, which is much easier to say, I think. So the plan today is to assemble the new version of the Heatset Insert Press, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, the differences between the new version and the old version. PCBWay is a all-in-one manufacture and assembly service for PCBs, but now they also do CNC machining, injection molding, sheet metal fabrication, and 3D printing. It's really easy to use. You can just upload your files and you'll get an instant quote and automated design for manufacturer feedback to help you just in case you need to improve your design a little bit. They also sponsor educational and engineering programs, so to try out PCBWay's easy ordering service, follow the link in the video description to PCBWay.com. So the tools you need a 2mm Allen key, a 3mm Allen key, an 8mm spanner or socket, and then one of these like thin 10mm spanners for adjusting the V-slot wheels. So I'm going to try to assemble this as quickly as I can without fumbling too much, and I'll explain as much as I can about the differences as I do that. So let's get a timer on the screen, if I can work out how to do that when I edit the video. Okay, let's begin in 3, 2, 1, go. So, the first thing you need to know is that there is now full documentation. So before it was a little bit limited. Obviously I had the video and that gave you a bit of instruction on how to assemble it. Ooh, but there was not much beyond that. So now we have documentation which tells you pretty much everything you need to know about it. So it starts with even some guidance on purchasing. So when you're purchasing, you need to obviously make sure you get the grip size correct, because that's got to be able to grip any soldering iron, namely your soldering iron. So it tells you a little bit about how to do that, and of course some additional instructions on those that don't have a soldering iron. Being a insert press, oh, that's the wrong way around. Being a heatset press for threaded inserts, heatset inserts, whatever you like to call them, you do need to have a soldering iron or heat source of some kind. It's designed to use soldering irons, and it will fit, I'm going to say any, it's pretty much any. There may be some out there which it won't work with, but most of them should work fine. So we've just got these two carriages to assemble first. So yeah, there's like a kind of buyer's guide if you like to make sure you're buying the right thing and get what you need in order to make it work. And then of course it runs through assembly, which is pretty simple. You will see today, just from watching me do this, that there's really nothing complicated in this assembly process. I've tried to make it as simple as possible and kind of as foolproof as possible. It's pretty easy to get right. But nevertheless, there's a pretty good guide. Each of the steps lays out the parts that you need, as well as a little exploded diagram to show you where all those parts need to go. So that should be everything you need in terms of assembly. And then once you've assembled it, there is a little bit of setup. So because we now have an adjustable counterweight, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, you need to be able to set that counterweight to be an appropriate mass. There's quite a lot of leeway. It doesn't need to be very specific, but it's useful to know how to tune it. And of course, because we have V-slot wheels, you need to get their spacing right. So it's just a very brief guide on how to do that correctly. And then I've also written a little bit about the usage. So the things that you need in order to use it correctly. Like, again, there's plenty of leeway. It's not a very in-depth guide, but it will make sure that you're using it in an appropriate way. So the first thing in terms of actual changes is we now have a counterweight which is adjustable. Previously, we used a stepper motor, which was kind of a broken stepper motor, which works fine, but it's not adjustable. If your soldering iron was a different weight, you'd need to get a different stepper motor, which makes basically no sense. The idea was you could use any broken stepper motor from an old printer that you didn't need. But some people were even dismantling 3D printers to make it. And I was like, no, this is not the idea. So I've adjusted the design to be more appropriate for, you know, instances where you're not dismantling a 3D printer in order to make it. Overall, there's fewer parts and it is much easier to source. So as I said, with like, I'm not using parts from 3D printers. Like there's lots of 3D printer based parts in it, like V-slot wheels, for example, you're probably very familiar with. But there's no reason why you couldn't get all of these parts yourself, like if you want to do that. But it can be still a bit of a pain in the ass to source individual things, so have kits if that's easier for you. I've also added a handle. In the previous design, it was quite easy to pick up and move around, but you always kind of grabbing the belts or in ways that were not the best. I was always just like grabbing it around here or on, you know, on these, and then they move and all this kind of stuff. So the new one has a little handle on the top. Doesn't make necessarily a big difference, but it's nice to have. The next is the grip. So the grip, which we're going to install now, is obviously designed such that it can be modified. By that I mean Fusion 360 files are available for you to download, and you can change the geometry. So I've used just 2 parameters, and that will allow you to change this size. So basically the diameter in the top and bottom. So for many soldering irons, they have a slight taper, and that will allow you to account for that. You adjust those 2 parameters in Fusion 360, export the new size, and you then have the size that fits your specific soldering iron. Obviously, the guide includes some information on the best way to measure your soldering iron to make sure you get a good fit. A good fit is important. If it's too loose, it will just fall out. But this grip does have a little bit of spring to it, kind of by design. It's not a lot, but as you see when you insert a soldering iron, you do get a little bit of just tension on that. Next is the base is now a 3D printed part, which is this part here. Previously, the way we had it set up was just like find a random piece of wood and like screw it to it, which by the principles of the previous design was fine. It worked, it did what it needed to do. But now for making a kit, it's not particularly practical to expect people to just have random pieces of wood laying around. So I needed to include something. Buying pieces of wood and aluminium would have been an option, but it would have significantly increased the price of the kit, and I thought it wasn't worth it. So I tried printing one, and it came out amazingly well. It's still super duper stable. It's obviously a little bit lighter, which is quite nice for moving it around, and doesn't affect the stability, and you'll maybe see why later on. We have integrated a hard end stop. So in the previous design, there is nothing to stop you. Hang on. I think the best way to explain it is if you were trying to do repeatable inserts. So if you got maybe 100 parts or something and you're going to do them all manually, then you can put a hard stop onto here, which is this piece, and it will just make sure that the depth at which you press those heat set inserts into is the same every single time, which is pretty useful. And of course, as I kind of mentioned already, the whole thing is now available as a kit. And it's not just one kit in terms of only one option. There are lots of configurable options so you can get what you want and not what you don't need. So if you just want the hardware, which is the extrusion or the screws and bearings and stuff like that, all the kind of metallic non-3D printed things, then there's a kit for that. If you want the 3D parts, you can add those in. The 3D printed parts, you can add those in. If you want some insert tips for your soldering iron and some threaded inserts, there's an option to add those too. And I've also added an option for STLs. It's not on the same listing, but you can download the STLs separately. If you purchase any of the hardware kit or 3D printed parts, you get the STLs for free. Those are available for anyone who's purchased any part of the main kit. And that's pretty much it, I think. So we're getting close to the assembly finish. So let's make sure that happens to have gone on just about right. So for adjustment, we just turn these very slightly. You do need to make sure that they are quite tight. So we've used nylock nuts to make sure everything stays tight once you've tightened it. I've used these nylocks quite a few times now, so they may start to slip a little bit. You want it kind of loose so it moves freely, but if it's too free then it will wobble, and that's not desirable. You want it probably a little bit looser than your 3D printer ones, because on there you're very much interested in precision and you've got plenty of torque, whereas here this is pretty good. This one is a little bit tight. You see it starts to grip too hard, so we can go past. Probably should have rotated this one the other direction, but we're okay. That's pretty good. So now we just move that belt over the top. Those are now attached together. To add the counterweight, screw up through the bottom, add our stack of washers. I already know, in fact, I'm not sure if that's the right amount or not. When you do your assembly yourself, you'll be able to just add a few to begin with, and then you can add a couple more later if you need them. The kit comes with 20 washers, which should be plenty for every soldering iron, but if you want to add more, you can add more. Obviously I've left plenty of length, so if you're sourcing yourself and maybe you can't get this size washer, some smaller ones, but more of them should still allow you to do what you need to do. The motion will be quite erratic while there's no weight added, but that's not a problem. So then we just add these stops. So we've got a hard stop and we've got a soft bump stop. The soft one is for the normal motion, if you like. So for every time you release it and it goes back to its original position, the soft stop will just stop it back in the normal place. Whereas the hard stop is the one that's on the downside. So if you say you needed it here every single time, you'd make sure you move it to here as you do it. Hold this, just tighten it in, and then it's going to go back to there every single time. And for this one, you drop the washer in here, screw in the top. This is going to be your soft stop. This one actually is 3D printed out of TPU. And that just sticks in here. You can obviously adjust these to your liking wherever you need them to be. If you want it up a bit or down a bit, you can move them. Then to add the soldering iron in, you just press that in, push it up, pull it in, and that's nice and solid fit in there. Let's move this down so we've got a full range of motion. And there you go, that's pretty much it. You've now got, obviously this plugs into your normal soldering iron station, and you have your heat inset press ready to go. Easy peasy. For the instructions, they're just on the main shop page. There's a link and you can click to download them. They also come with your downloads when you purchase as well, so you don't need to worry about missing things. You'll find them, it's all there. STLs, as I said, are free if you buy any of the hardware kit or printed parts, but if not, you can buy them still separately. They're available on the shop too. All the links for that will be down below. As I mentioned, you can get the kit from vector3d.co.uk. You can also get this t-shirt there as well. So this is the Obsidian t-shirt. I can wear this nozzle t-shirt. This is obviously an Obsidian t-shirt. This one has a black outline. The final one will have a white one. Just so you know, it's a little bit different, but it will still look largely like this. So that's going to be it for me today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.